has now been on my litho plates for at least 20 minutes, so I'm ready to go ahead and do the second etch. And for the second etch, where we roll up the image with ink, if you're going to be printing in a color ink, it's good to roll up your image with that color ink now, so that your image has that memory, and so that, you know, we're not removing black ink from the image when we're rolling it up to print. It's already been rolled up with the ink that we're going to use. So sometimes I find that doing the second etch right before you're ready to print is a good idea, so that you don't have to clean up your roller each time. So I'm going to start by getting my ink ready. I know I want to print my blue layer first, so I'm going to mix up the blue ink. And when printing with color, you don't need, again, a lot of ink. We're going to be using a rubber roller instead of the leather one. And the rubber rollers put down less ink, so you might have to actually roll up your image more times in order to get that darkness that you're looking for. So I'm going to bring out this blue. I'm wanting to print my images similar to CMYK, so I've grabbed this processed cyan litho ink. And so there's a few terms to be aware of, like the opacity of litho inks. These inks are actually already semi-transparent, but if you really want your ink to jump off the page, it's good to mix it with a little bit of this transparent tint base, and that way the paper underneath your ink will be able to reflect light. So I'm going to start with a little bit of the tint base and start mixing some of my cyan into it. And mixing litho inks, or inks in general in printmaking, is a lot like mixing inks for painting. So, you know, if I was wanting a really light cyan, I would start with white and slowly add blue to it. If you add white to blue, you're gonna have to make a ton of ink in order to get the kind of blue that you're looking for. So the same thing goes with transparency. If you're wanting a really transparent ink, start with the transparency and then mix your blue into it. You can test the transparency of your ink by doing what we call a drawdown. So take from the scrap paper drawer just a small thin sheet of paper, and you're going to take a little bit of ink and actually pull it down, and that way you can see how transparent it is. I actually want it to be a little bit more transparent, so I'm gonna again start with a little bit of the transparent base and then mix this cyan into it. And you want to make sure that it's really well mixed, so you don't have any streaks when you're actually rolling the ink out on your roller. And if you do start printing a color and you realize that it's not the color that you want, you can go darker without having to clean off your plate. You'll just want to print your image a bunch to remove as much ink as possible, and you can print it on scrap paper or newsprint, and then you'll clean off your roller, roll out that darker shade, and then you can roll up your image. If you're wanting to go lighter, you will have to again, like, apply the talc, layer of gum arabic, let it dry, and then rinse out your image with lithotine, add asphaltum, and then roll up your image in the lighter. All right, let's see what this looks like. So that's a bit better. I can see, you know, it's more of the transparency that I was looking for. So because I didn't actually use this ink, I'm gonna put it back in the jar, smooth it along the bottom. And let's see, we want what's called a long ink, but I can see it's not actually breaking at any point. So I might actually add a little bit of magnesium. If you were printing like a really large flat area, then a looser ink would be better. But because I do have some areas of detail, I'm gonna wanna add a little bit of mag. And this is gonna help to stop my image from filling in too much. By contrast, if your ink is too stiff, you could add some tack reducer or litho varnish to loosen it up. So I can already see that that's stiffened up a little bit. Add a little bit more, and I'm adding slowly. Let's do that. So we'll start with that, and then we'll see how our image rolls up. And again, you want to make sure that it's really well blended. Okay. So when you're ready, I'm just going to measure out the length of my roller. Probably have to put more ink down, but start with this. And again, I'm slightly turning it as I roll it out. To make sure that ink is evenly dispersed. I'm liking that color. I can already see that I'm going to need more ink, so I'm actually going to go ahead and do that. And make sure it's really even. Switch sides. All right, so that's looking nice and even. Our roller's ready to go. And now we're ready to start removing the ink from our image and rolling it up with this Faltum. So to ensure that my plate doesn't move around a lot while I'm inking it up, I'm actually going to apply a couple pieces of double-sided tape to the back of my plate. So similar to stone litho. I'm going to apply lithotine to my image. Let it sit there for a second. And when it's had a second to sit there for a minute, you can start rubbing out your image with a cloth. Nice, it's coming out pretty well. So when your image is completely removed, then you'll want to buff in the asphaltum. You can use the same rag. Again, I'm just buffing the asphaltum into the image areas. And I'll tight wipe it with Kin Wipe and let it sit there for a second. And after the asphaltum has had a minute to sit on your image, you can get your dirty sponge in order to clean off the gum. And the asphaltum. It might take a minute to get the gross hardened gum from around the edges. And it's actually not the biggest deal if you don't get all of that off. But it should soften up with the water. All right. And then when you got all that gross stuff off, you can switch to your clean sponge. And then you're ready to start inking up your image. Alright, so that was my first rollout. And I'm gonna go again. Again, rolling out from different directions to ensure that everything gets inked up. So it's starting to get there. Again, keeping the plate wet so that it doesn't pick up with ink. And I think we're almost there. So, you know, it's a lot different than rolling up an image with black ink. I think I might go one more time because obviously it's a lighter blue color. I didn't draw this with a cyan crayon, so I think I'm gonna go one more time. Just actually difficult to know until you start printing it. And I know that my color is also semi-transparent, which is what I'm wanting. But I just want to make sure that it's rolled up fully. I think that's good. All right, so when you feel like you've got it to the point that you want it, again, we'll let it dry. And then we'll talc it. Just talc, no rosin, like before. Then we'll mix our etch like before. 1 part tapum to 2 parts gum. Mix it up, spread it around our image, rub it in. It's been a long time since I broke all alone. I can't get the tears of a life I never loved. Carry me back, carry me back, carry me back. Baby, where I come from. I'm going to take off some of the gum with a sponge and then buff it down with a cheesecloth, and again let it sit for at least 20 minutes, and then I'm ready to print. Again, trying to get out all the streaks so that it doesn't affect my image. All right. Now I am tearing my paper down to 11 by 14. Cut down a couple pieces of newsprint to proof on. Right, so here's a couple pieces of newsprint that are also 11 by 14. And to mark my paper for registration, I'm gonna take a ruler, and similar to what we did on our plate, on the newsprint it doesn't matter which side, but on your good paper you're gonna wanna mark the back side, obviously. I'm gonna make a little bar mark, and these are what's gonna line up with those bar marks that I made on my plate in order to ensure that my paper lands in exactly the same place each time. So you can see why it's important to prepare this ahead of time so that you're not scrambling to do it while you're printing. And then I can do it on my good paper, so making sure that I'm on the back. Sometimes it's good to make a small little mark as to what is going to be like the top of your paper where the T is. So I'm going to put just like a little arrow, and that way I know which way to put my paper down. Right, so I'm going to do this to each and every one of my papers, and then I'll be ready to print. To print this plate litho, I'm going to use a different press. It's still the same function and idea, but this one's a combination press, so you can actually like add the litho scraper to print a litho, or you can add a roller to print an etching or a monotype. So I've actually already removed the roller and put in my scraper bar, and I've also added what's called a plate backer, which is this really thick piece of steel, and this is so that because our plate is thin, it's not thick like a litho, if we didn't place this on the press bed, our scraper bar wouldn't be able to reach all the way down to the flatbed of this press. So we put the plate backer on here so that it elevates our plate so we can run it through the press. I have selected a scraper bar that is larger than my image but smaller than my plate. This one's only 10 inches, but again, it'll vary depending on how big your image is. And so to use this press, this is how you apply the pressure. So it's a little bit different. It actually is elevating the press bed to bring it up. And then it's actually not engaged until you bring this pressure bar down. So that's when the press will actually start rolling. Again, I'm gonna put tape on the back of my plate in hopes that it will help it adhere a little bit. And I also want to make sure that it's underneath the scraper bar. So that's actually perfect. I can see that my image is going to land under my scraper bar. So as this gets wet, the tape might loosen, but hopefully not. Again, I'm going to mark my starting and stopping points. So this is about the time that I would want to apply pressure. Mark it with a piece of masking tape, and then this, once it clears my image, is the time when I will release pressure. All right, and so to check the pressure, again, I'm putting down 2 pieces of newsprint and my tympan with grease on it. I'm going to push it through till the scraper bar is right above my plate. All right, so I'm going to check the pressure by pushing down on the lever. And again, if there's like no pressure at all, you can set the pressure and then tighten it by moving this thing. This acts as a kind of lock, so if you're having trouble getting more pressure, you can loosen this and then you'll be able to tighten this. I actually have the pressure set already. But again, you want to make sure that you're applying pressure, and you can even, remove the pressure a little bit and then tighten it a bit up here for increased pressure. And this is something, again, that we can adjust as we go through. All right, so now the press is all set up and ready for us to ink our plate. When we're ready to print, again, we're going to run it through the steps. Apply some lithography. Give it a second to soak in. Again, I'm going to rub some asphaltum into it. Prepare our image to receive ink. Then we'll wash off the gum and start to roll it up. Switch to a clean sponge. Again, making sure to keep everything nice and damp. Go grab my roller. I'm using the same roller and ink that I used for my first etch, or my second etch, sorry. That way I don't have to clean my roller twice. Again, keeping it damp. Going back to roll up. And I think I'm going to ink it one more time and then I'm going to pull it through. Just wipe off the excess. There's some skimming, but it's definitely not as bad as with the stone litho. All right, so I'm going to line up these small little bars with the T I made at the top, so I know where the top of the paper is gonna land, and line up my bar with that. And then I'm gonna line up my bottom bar at the bottom. And then I'll place the newsprint's a little hard because it gets curly. Lay my tympan down. All right, so now I'm going to push my press until it gets to my starting mark. And then I'm going to apply pressure. And then I'm going to roll it through until I get to my stopping mark. Perfect. And then I'm going to alleviate pressure, pull it back through, and see what we got. Ooh, all right. So that looks like nice and bright to me, like quite transparent, like I wanted. I think I might actually put a little bit more ink down on my palette because I have inked it up twice now, and keep going. I'm going to print another one on newsprint because I do want to see what it looks like with the magenta one next to it, but I'm pretty happy with how that color looks. Again, keep it wet. So I have a bit of a rhythm going that's 4 passes of about 4 rolls. That was my last roll. And I'm going to print it on good paper. So again, lining up those little bars with the T that I made at the top, and then the bar that I made at the bottom. The good paper obviously lays a lot flatter than the newsprint. Pushing my bed to the starting point, applying pressure, rolling it through to the stopping point. Releasing pressure, pulling back through, seeing what we got. All right. So I'm pretty happy with that. I might actually put a little bit more ink down, but it looks lighter because obviously this paper is lighter. It's quite transparent, but it's really bright, which is what I was wanting. And I wanted it transparent because my magenta layer is going to go on top and I want them to mix. So now I'm just going to keep on printing until I'm finished with my addition. When you finished printing your plate, you're ready to close your image. But we could use this image in the future. We could even print it with a different color if we want. So to ensure that it stays protected for future printing, again, I put some talc on. And I'm using just straight gum, a little bit. Rub it all over the plate. Probably gonna need a bit more. And then I'm gonna buff it down with a cheesecloth. And then I can store it in my drawer for future printing. Again, I want to get out all those streaks and thick spots so they won't affect my image. All right, so when it's buffed down, you can remove your plate from the press bed. And you'll want to clean down the press bed. I'm just using the cheesecloth to take off the excess gum. Just going to use an abrasive sponge to remove that gum. Some paper towels. And I can see there's still a bit of a halo of blue ink. So I'm going to get the vegetable oil to loosen that blue ink. A little bit. There we go. Then I'll degrease with some denatured alcohol. And we're ready to clean up our slab. So to clean up the roller, I'm gonna place this down first, and I'm just gonna roll off as much of the ink as I can to start. And then I'm going to use the scraper. If you haven't added anything to the ink, or you know you want to use this ink again, you can save it. Using parchment paper, you can make like a little envelope. I'm going to scrape up most of this ink. Scrape this up. Clean up my other spatulas. Put down some of the vegetable oil to loosen the ink and get most of it off. Just a paper towel or a dirty rag. And then, so to finish up this part, take some of the denatured alcohol to just get that last little bit of ink and grease off. Again, with the spatulas, make sure you do the edges and the handles, and get all of that blue ink off. And we'll clean up the slab. All right, so now we need to clean the roller. So I'm gonna start with some vegetable oil and paper towel. And again, I'm just not rubbing really hard because the ink is really on there and I just wanna like really loosen it on the surface. I think I'm gonna do that actually one more time because there seems to still be like a lot of ink on here. And you want to get these rollers nice and clean. Good. So that's looking better. It's hard to tell because the roller's black and the ink is a very transparent blue. So to degrease the roller, I don't want to use the denatured alcohol because it will dry out the roller and crack it. So I'm going to use simple green. I'm going to spray it all over, take a clean rag, and go back and forth. I also want to clean the sides of it, because sometimes ink can spurt over. And I keep going to like clean areas of the cloth and going back and forth, pressing really hard to make sure that see how there's a little bit more blue on there? We want to make sure that none of that comes off anymore. I think it's looking pretty good. All right, so when you're finished, just put all your inks away, make sure there's no blue left anywhere, and you're ready to start your second layer. Lonely, 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 lonely.